All right, this is my second in a multi-part series on how to make a table view work for Swift in Xcode. I'm using Xcode 8.3.2 and for Swift version 3.1. If either of those versions do not match yours, your mileage may vary. Okay, so I want to add a couple of notes based off of the last video. First off, the assets. I've added a few assets, specially named Sample 1, Sample 2, Sample 3, because I am original and that's how I operate. Actually, I kept the names very simple for reasons that will become apparent later. Um, so, there's a lot to do in this section, and we're even going to go back and do some back work to fill in some gaps that are missing for us to go forward, which means we might be jumping around a little bit. If you need to pause this, if you need to rewind, if you just need to stop and fill something in on your code, absolutely do that. No shame. Make your code work. We finished up looking at this storyboard here, specifically this content view, the cell right here, and let's turn on our assistant editor. Now I want to get a couple of things going, so let's adjust the size a little bit. All right, actually, yeah, that's fine. This is fine. Everything's fine. So I want to actually pull some of this information into here. I want to create a couple of outlets, one for this image, one for this label. If there's other information that you will be adding, you'll obviously need to make outlets for those as well. There's two ways to do this, two easy ways to do this. First off is hold Control and then click on whatever you want to take. So I want to take this image, and I'm going to put this image right here. Yes. I'm going to create an outlet. I want to create an object. I want to create this image inside of here. See, type image view. So this image is going to be cover preview. All right, and connect. And notice we're using camel case. That's for the image view. The other easy way to do this is to actually click over here. We're eventually going to get a lot of stuff going on this page, and an easy way to make sure you're clicking on exactly what you want to click on is to go over here to this outline view, find the exact thing. See how it's highlighting my name right here? I want to do that, and I'm going to do that. Cover preview. Now I'm going to move this here, and I'm going to say, all right, this is comic name. Okay, that is a UI label. Everything else we're going to leave alone. That is an outlet. Perfect. We're going to connect. Good. We see these little dots. These mean they are connected. Lastly, I'm actually going to put a little comment in up here, and I'm just going to say that this is properties. And we're going to be talking about our good friend Mark. Why he gets his name on everything, I don't know, but you know, whatever. That's a joke, by the way, if you're not sure. These are properties. So we're marking these as properties, and we'll see how we end up using these properties in a little bit. But one thing that we want to start thinking about is as we build more and more cells, each cell, here's, our example cell, each cell is going to be attached to a specific comic book. So this cell is going to be attached to, I don't remember which one, maybe Infinity War or something. But then the next cell is going to be attached to a different comic book. And each comic book is going to have all these different pieces of information. They're going to have the name. They're going to have the image. Maybe later we'll put in a description. We'll create a rating system, probably not in the next video, but maybe the video after, so that you can have a little star rating system. So they're going to have all this information attached to them, not just the cell, but the actual comic book itself. So I want to make an object, a unique and special and custom object to do that. Well, we're going to need another Swift file. Let's come up here to File, New, File, and again you can do Command N and that'll bring you straight here. We're going to go ahead and add a Swift file because it is very quick. We want to make sure that it targets our project. We don't want to target our tests right now. It goes inside the file with the rest of our files, and we're going to create. Okay. oh no, this is a blank coding file. This is one of the most horrifying things that you could ever see when you first start out coding. So let's get some things in here. First off, what I want to go ahead and do um, is add, instead of importing Foundation, we actually want to import our UI kit because this is going to affect our UI. You might need to import Foundation depending on what you're doing later, but for now it's not really necessary. Okay, so we're going to import our UI kit, and then we're going to create a class, and its name is going to be Comic with a capital C. Comic. Our class is not going to have a superclass. It's not special enough for that. Oh no. I need to delete things. Everything's fine. Okay, so our class, and then down here in our code, we're going to talk about our friend Mark again. Mark. And we're going to give it some properties. So, properties, starting off, we only have a names, and the names are things that we're going to write to. We're going to say name is a variable. Name, this is a local variable for this class. And then variable, and we're going to have the cover as well. That's what we're going to call those images that go with them, because they're actually comic book covers. So in my case, it's actually going to be called cover. Depending on what you're doing, obviously not everybody is making their favorite comic book app, because not everybody is as cool as I am. So I want this to be a UIImage, which means that when I create this later, when I start calling this class, I need to make sure that what I'm putting into it are UI images. All right, you'll notice I also added a question mark on the end of image. That goes into that whole, this needs to be UI image. We're going to need to check that. And there's this whole process in here. We'll get into what the question mark means at the end of there. Right now, it just means that it is going to play more nicely than it would without it. So let's go ahead and make an initialization. Mark. All right, so Mark's making an initialization for us. So we just want to say when we create this, we need the name, which is going to be a string. We need the cover, which is going to be a UI image, hopefully. And then that's all we're starting with. And then we're actually going to create an initialization for this. So we tell it, hey, here's what you're doing when you initialize. So we're going to initialize some stored properties. Self.name is going to equal name. So when we create a instance of this class, whatever name is for this class, it's going to be what it's initialized with. So self.name equals name. Convenient, no? All right, and then self dot cover is going to equal, hopefully you can guess this one. The answer is cover. The secret ingredient is phone. Okay, so cover is going to be equal to cover. And that should almost work. We're going to actually use a special command for this that some of you may not have seen before. This is the guard command. We're making a guard statement. So our guard is a lot like an if statement. If you've used if let before, guard works a lot like that. So if something could be made, here guard is actually a different way of doing that. It's something that was implemented in Xcode during one of the Xcode 2 iterations, and it basically says, "Hey, check this, but don't crash if I can't if it's bad." So is empty. So this is a special thing that basically says um, if this is not true, so if name is not empty, you're fine. Otherwise, return nil. That way, this is just a special way of putting that. You could do it with an if statement, but once you get into the nitty gritty of it, it fails testing, and guarding is a better practice for doing exactly what we did right here. Okay, so we've got our class created. Now that we've got our class created, we're going to want to go back and just take a look at our, oh, that's our launch screen. No, no. Everything's fine. We want to go back and look at our main screen, our main storyboard. We have how the cell acts right now, so that's good. Now, what we want to do is make something for the entire TableView controller, this entire table view. So we're going to have to make another file, new file, or command N, Cocoa Touch class. We're making a new view controller. Now we see we created a table view cell before, so this is the first thing that's actually showing up as a table view cell. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to name this comics. It's a class, but now I'm going to select not table view cell, but table view controller, and you can see comics table view controller. So we know exactly what this is. We don't need an XIB file. We want Swift. We're going to click next. This should have the targets at our project. Should not have any tests right now. And then up here, we are in our folders. So create. All right, so we've got this big old mess of stuff. So table view controllers come with a ton of information already in here. They're like, you know what, you're probably going to do something like this. You're probably going to do something like this. So let's just give the user all this code to start with and see they have it nice and commented out for us. They're like, you probably are going to want this, but we're not going to make you do anything with it right away. It's just going to sit here. And that was so nice of them, because we're not actually going to do anything with it right away. So we've made this. We're going to start with an empty array. So it needs to be mutable, which means this is going to be a variable, var, variable, and this is going to be comics, lowercase. Notice lowercase, because it is a variable. It is actually an array, but it is this data object. It is not a class. So variable comics equals data. Not that. Data type inside of square brackets. Our data type is comics. That class that we just created. And then we're going to open and close parentheses. So we're going to, let's go ahead and have Mark stop in properties. And so we're creating a property here. It's these comics. We're going to have an empty set of comics that we're going to add to actually right now. So now I'm going to comment Mark, and these are going to be private methods. So what do I mean by private methods? I mean, you cannot call these methods outside of this class. We're not going to get really into the noodly part of what exactly that means right now. If you don't know, I'll tell you when you're older. So these are the private methods that we want to use for loading up our initial sample comics. So we're actually going to call this private, which means that we can. This only happens inside of this class, and function func, and we're going to load sample comics. Because I am unoriginal in my naming, because that makes it easier to read. So inside of here, I want to do a couple of things. I want to go ahead and initialize the covers. So on my covers, I'm going to say let cover 1 equal. And now I'm calling a UI image. UI image name. Remember earlier I said we were going to make sure that we gave UI images to that class? Well, we're making sure these are UI images right now. And you'll notice in my assets I have, again, these really simple names, lowercase, sample 1, sample 2, sample 3. For example ones or for samples, I would keep these images or names as simple as possible. You might want more descriptive than sample 1, sample 2, sample 3, but I'm doing this as an example so that you can do it with whatever images for whatever topic you're doing. Name. And you know what I did? I did this wrong. Named, past tense. It has a name. The name already existed. Sample 3. All right, so I've got my samples in there. Now I also want to. Nope. Comment. So I want to initialize my first 3 comic objects, the ones that have these covers. So for the first one, we are going to do guardlet again, or we're going to do guard again. What that guard is going to allow me to do is I will say guardlet. Well, you can see me do it. Guardlet comic 1 equal comic there we go, comic name. So the name of the first one was Infinity War, but I'm going to have a problem with that because it needs to be a string. So let's do that. Infinity War, and the cover is just going to be cover 1. We're going to keep that nice and simple. Cover 1. I just cover 1. We're going to keep it nice and simple. You can see I've got cover defined up here. It already knows what it is, so I'm going to put that right there. So guard let me create this, else I'm going to throw an error. And this might not be how you want to handle this in the future, but for right now, throwing an error, this lets me know, oh, this hit a fatal error. Here's the error code. Unable to instantiate comic 1. What that's going to let me know as the programmer, when I get that error, oh, I did something wrong when I created the first comic. And then I'm going to do the same thing. All right, and I skipped through comic 3 because you know exactly what I was going to do. I did exactly the thing that I did last time, and you can tell I copy-pasted because I totally left comic 2 in the fatal error. Okay, so from this point, we are doing pretty well, but inside of this function, we actually want to tell it, okay, so inside that function, so before where it turned yellow there, I also want to put these three items into the original comics array that I made globally. So we're going to say comics plus equals comic comic 1, comic 2, and comic 3. This means that I am putting the information from these into the actual array. So sweet, putting that all together. And then we made sure to close that function. Everything looks great. This looks beautiful. We do want to do one last thing. We're going to go inside of this view controller and we're going to say, see this memory warning, view did load. So view did load is where everything happens when this gets loaded. We want to go ahead and say when this loads, do this method down here, load your sample comics. So then we'll say load sample comics. So that way, that will happen when this controller loads. Okay, let's build it. Okay, so we're going to bring up the simulator. We put in all this code. We've connected all the comics. We put all this in. That means that when we load this, we'll get the white launch screen. And still nothing. Stay tuned. Next time, we will actually get this all loaded and into this front screen. We've got just a few more steps to go.